Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Colette Rogers, and I'm here with Sarah Isenberg. We're here to present this webinar, Beyond Ultra-Processed Foods, Unlocking Freedom from the Convenience Trap. So I want to start with just a short bit about each of us. And Sarah, do you want to start on that? Uh-oh. Unmute yourself.
You even muted me. So I'm Sarah.
Oh, I did. I muted you too.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know me, I am Sarah Isenberg, and I am a nationally board certified health and wellness coach. And I am based in Boston, but I say I serve everywhere because I really work primarily remotely. And my primary area of focus is helping midlife women prevent and reverse chronic conditions like obesity and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, things like that. And so I work with women one-on-one. I really work with anybody, no matter how they identify, but my primary niche is middle-aged women. And I work with people one-on-one, in groups. I do corporate wellness programs, and I am a former lawyer, and so I work with lawyers a lot. Busy people who eat a lot of ultra-processed food, and also who really don't have time, they feel, to focus on their health and wellness. So I help people figure out how to make time to do that, make themselves a priority.
Oh, great. One of the things that connected Sarah and I is that we were both former lawyers. And so we know about lawyers eating really poor food. That was the worst eating time of my life. But now I am reformed, and I call myself a meal making transformation specialist. And what that means is that I help people around new ways of thinking, new ways in the kitchen, and new ways of cooking, so that meal making becomes doable for everybody, even if we're crazy busy. Because we really want everybody to gain the benefits of healthy meal making and healthy eating. And the thing I'm working on the most right now is around that new thinking piece, and what I'll be talking about today. It's examining the barriers in our head that keep us from embracing the kitchen and cooking as our friends and allies on the path to healthy eating. So with that, let me give you a quick overview of where we're going today. The reason that Sarah and I were kind of excited to co-present is that we both come at the processed food thing from different perspectives. I come from kind of the macro level, like the cultural level, and Sarah works with people on the individual level as a health coach. And so we thought it would be helpful to experiment and see, well, what if we brought both of these perspectives to the discussion? So I hope you find it helpful as well. So to start, we're each going to give a little background information on our different perspectives. And then we're going to go on to talk about motivation, that thing that lights the fire in our belly, that helps us relieve that tension between, oh, yeah, we really want to do something about these UPFs in our life, but we don't know how, we're not motivated to do something. So we want to explore a little bit about what's going to get us to take that first step. And on this point, we'd love to get input and feedback from you. What helps motivate you? What issues do you face on that topic? And then we'll close out with some practical tips. And I think those are going to be woven throughout, especially in Sarah's part. But we'll focus on some things, especially my handouts in that last part. So in terms of my part of this, my segment, I have been on a processed food kick for the last 2 or 3 months. And those of you who are on my e-newsletter list, you know that because I've been writing about it and speaking about it a lot. And the reason for that is that, I've been in the healthy eating field for over 30 years. And as I watched people trying to gravitate towards better eating over these years, I noticed that we were having to dodge and dart around a lot of different things. At first, you remember in the 90s when it was all about fat. And so we did everything we could to get rid of the fat in our diet. Well, when that ended, it went on to sodium, and then it went on to sugar. And now it's on to things like colorings, preservatives, so-called natural flavorings, things like that. And so we have to be doing this darting and dodging around, trying to find out what's the bad guy du jour. And so when I thought about it, I said, you know what? Isn't it interesting that all of those so-called bad guys reside in processed foods? So wouldn't it make some sense that we get rid of processed foods? Wouldn't that probably get us 75 to 95% of the way towards our healthy eating goals? And so that's why I have been really emphasizing and encouraging people around examining the processed food issue. And so where I started was with a couple of talks around processed foods. And one of those was a webinar. The link to that will be in the handouts in the show notes. So don't worry if you haven't done it or you haven't seen it or anything. I'm going to recap some of the most important things that you might need to know to make sense of this talk. The first of those is this UPF term I'm using, this ultra processed food term. What you need to know is that processed foods is actually a pretty big category. Even cooking would be considered processing, or pressing the olive oil, the olives to get olive oil, or making butter. All of those are a form of processing, but the only kind of processing that we're really concerned about here are the category of processed foods that are called ultra processed foods, or UPFs. And these are the things that can only be made in a factory. You can't make these. You need big vats and extruders and high pressure machines. And so what the experts have come to call these is industrial formulations. They're not really foods at all. These are things like, you might see corn in a can. Okay, so it's been canned, but then we have making those into corn chips with all sorts of barbecue flavor, or I know Melanie was talking about whatever her daughter liked, those spicy hot ones or something. But
Flaming hot Cheetos.
Flaming hot Cheetos, yes. Yeah, we can kind of guess there's something wrong there. And there's just so many of these, the hot dogs, the deli turkey, the entire snack food aisle, pretty much. A lot of the breads, frozen meals, and things like that. So that's what we're concerned about. And so the next question is, well, what's so really bad? Are they really that bad? And in that webinar, we went over a lot of the science that shows that, yes, they are a problem. And the most recent one that I read about was a meta study that studied a lot of other studies, found out that consumption of ultra processed foods is connected to no less than 32 conditions and diseases. So yeah, it's a problem. In fact, just 2 days ago, I read an article about how it messes with our microbiome, which we all know that, we all know about the microbiome now. It's this critical to a foundation of our health. And it's made up of trillions of these little microbes that are living things. They need food. The food that they want is fiber. The problem is with ultra processed foods, and now that 60% of our calories are ultra processed foods, well, the fiber is stripped from those ultra processed foods. So the majority of calories that we're eating is not contributing any food to these vital little microbes in our microbiome. So you can just imagine the health problems that are arising from that. The happy news is that there's a really easy solution. If you don't want to eat ultra processed foods, it doesn't mean you're going to starve. There's this entire kingdom of real whole foods that are out there: the nuts, the seeds, the entire vegetable and fruit kingdom, clean proteins, it just on and on and on, herbs and spices. And those, we don't have to worry about excess sodium or bad fats in those. The problem with that, of course, is what I call the viability issue. That easy solution may not sound so easy to use to you, because those real whole foods generally have to be prepared somehow, cooked, assembled somehow. And so when you think about that, you go, wow, does that mean I would have to do that, every day? Like maybe a couple times a day? Like, who would do that, right? Well, so what we explored in the webinar is, how can we get around that? What are some solutions to that? And one of the solutions is simplifying cooking, making it so it's really easy by sticking to simple triangle meals and then learning a couple basic techniques that you can use over and over and over again with all sorts of different foods to make delicious foods without having to resort to recipes that kind of can sometimes confuse us. The other thing that we talked about as another solution is to think about our thinking. And that gets into this macro level that I'm going to talk about, the cultural norms that are kind of guiding us. So when we think about the thinking issue, what it triggers in my mind is the word enablement. You think about it. Why do we automatically think that making real whole food meals is outrageous, outlandish? Like, who does that? It's kind of a knee-jerk response, like, who's got time for that? Nobody has time for that. So the next question is, well, how did our lives ever get so busy that we don't have time to do the number one most important thing as part of the human species? To procreate and to keep the species alive, what do we need to do? We need to survive and thrive. And what's the key to surviving and thriving? Is to eat the kind of food that will help us stay healthy. How did we get to a point in this advanced civilization that we don't have time for that we think that's outlandish and outrageous? So what I feel like when I think about this processed food issue is that we've been enabled. We've been enabled to eat in a way that is against our best self-interest. So quick definition of an enabler. I think we all know about this, but I'm just going to give you this definition to put it top of mind. And let me get a sip of water here. An enabler is one that enables another to achieve an end, especially a self-destructive behavior. They do this by making it possible to avoid the consequences of that destructive behavior. So how has the processed food industry enabled this? Well, think about it. Historically, if you didn't deal with your food and make some food, what would you do? You'd starve, you'd go hungry, right? But now the situation is completely different. You never need to make another meal in your life if you don't want to. We've got everywhere you go, there's some kind of ultra processed food that's available for you. You don't have to prepare it. You don't have to do anything. It's cheap. It's super tasty. And in fact, it's so tasty that it's addictive. And it's everywhere. You can have that. And so we have learned that we've organized our lives around the fact that we no longer have to make time for meal making in our lives. So the advertised happy consequence of this is that we have all this freedom to do everything else in life that we want to do. And a lot of that is really good stuff, being with friends and family, of course, doing your work, earning a living. But there's also an unadvertised, not so happy consequence of this, is that our health is rapidly deteriorating. Close to 2/3 of us are now suffering at least one, if not two or more chronic diseases. And that doesn't count all the other conditions that were, IBS, hyperthyroidism, all of that kind of stuff. So does that sound like self-destructive behavior? We're being enabled to eat in a way and to organize our lives in a way that the only foods that we can eat are ones that lead to our ill health and sickness. And self-destructive behavior. Sometimes I kind of half joke that we're probably the first species on the planet that's going to self-extinct by the end of the 21st century. So all of this leaves us in a state of tension. I'm sure none of you are saying, oh yeah, I really want to eat UPFs all day, every day. And that's why we're here, right? We sense that something's not quite right about this picture, but we do feel trapped. We fill our lives with everything else, and we don't have time to make the room so that we can make these real whole foods meals. And we've lost a lot of the skills that make that even possible. So that's the point of this talk, is how can we get the skills and reorient our thinking to defy the cultural norms that are shunting us off into self-destructive behaviors. So let me just talk a little bit more about these cultural norms. These are things that we didn't create, we didn't agree to, we don't control, but we end up living by them. And when I say that maybe we need to rearrange our lives so that we can make time and open space to make meals, that seems really impossible. I know, because we filled our lives with other things. But I want to talk a little bit about values here, because I think we have more leeway in our lives than we think. And the thing that I've noticed in my life, and maybe think about this and you can give me some feedback, is that as we change those deep values, more possibilities open up where we thought that nothing was there, nothing was available. Because values are the drivers. We don't think about them much. They're kind of subconscious, but they're driving how we prioritize our time. So think about the things that we value. And it's a lot of things, but the sad news is that cooking has kind of gradually devolved down to where it's in one of the lowest spots on the value ranking. And what's interesting is to think about how did that happen? How did it get to be so low on the totem pole? Because historically, and if you look at other cultures around the world, it's a very valued and respected activity. It's they know. I mean, when you look at all the blue zones, you can bet that they are making their own meals. And so what you need to know is that there's some history here to know about. And I found out about this in this book called Something from the Oven. And it's an historical account of how did this happen? How did cooking get to be so devalued? And I've got other recordings on this, but short story is post-World War II, we don't need to feed K rations to the service members anymore. War is over. What do we do with all this industrial capacity that was devoted to making K rations? Well, we make them for consumers like you and me. And at first, the women, because they were in charge of things back in the 50s, they're in charge of things in the kitchen. They rejected them outright. They were like, these glorified K rations. It's like, no, we don't want those. So the food industry went to great lengths to convince us that, yeah, we really do want these. And so there's a whole lot of history about what went on to get us convinced that we should adopt a processed food lifestyle. But the one that I'm real interested in here is how there was a concerted marketing campaign all over the nation to convince women that cooking was no longer a valuable activity. It was old-fashioned, it was tedious, kind of a silly waste of time. Something like, as old-fashioned as darning your socks and writing letters. And like I say, we didn't agree to this. We didn't know what was going on, but it's become the cultural norm. And now it dictates our food lives and gets in the way of us springing ourselves from the convenience food trap. So it's really important for us to consider these waters that we swim in, these cultural norms that dictate what we do and we don't value. Because if we can reorient our values to the things that will really support us instead of contribute to self-destructive behaviors, we might very well find that the time becomes available, the space opens up to make those real whole foods meals that will save our health. So I want to close my little section here by just asking you some questions and inviting you to think about them. First question is, why is it that, we have access to almost every kind of tool under the sun? We've got recipes galore, cookbooks galore, cooking shows, appliances, time-saving gadgets, diet book, nutrition information, gorgeous kitchens, pre-cut veggies, shopping services, but we still struggle to get good meals on the table, and a lot of times we fail. Why is that? How can we have so many conveniences and yet still be unable to do that? And I look back at my mom with so little that she had, and yet every night a good meal on the table. Second question, do we really believe that food is medicine? We say this all the time. Do we really believe that? Do you really value your health that much? More than anything? That sounds that's kind of like a big ask, right? More than anything. But really, where are we without our health? And I'm sure Sarah would agree with that 100%, right? Where are we? Question number 3. Do I really, maybe deep down, kind of look down on cooking? Does it indeed seem just a little bit frumpy and old-fashioned? And maybe I don't really think it's worth my precious time. Don't feel bad if you think like that, because I absolutely did. As a young attorney, we did our best to make sure we never talked about anything around the kitchen, and we stayed out of the kitchen and didn't ever talk about cooking. And then question number 4, is all this stuff about cooking not being very valuable, is it true? And who told us all this? Who told us this? It's an industry that is making money off of feeding us foods that's sickening us. Do we really need to believe this? Or do we need to start thinking a new way? So this is so important, because ultimately, let me be honest with you. If we want to eliminate ultra-processed foods from our diet, we have to have something else to eat. And I mentioned that something is real whole foods. They're wonderful, they're delicious, they're colorful, they're beautiful, but they have to be prepared. So ultimately, we need to be in the kitchen. We need to do this thing called cooking, preparing, assembling, whatever you want to call it. We've done the industrial food experiment. It doesn't work, and you can't, the business model doesn't work, the economics don't work to mass produce truly healthful food. So we have to learn that the kitchen is our friend, it's our ally. Can we, instead of looking at it as a place of tedium and chore and drudgery, can we learn to embrace it as our friend and ally instead of fighting it? But don't worry, I'm not asking you to do that today. That's a big step. And remember, the entire culture is trying to keep you trapped down below, keep you out of the kitchen. And I call it our convenience eating culture. So you're up against a lot of pressure. So we're going to be talking a lot. Sarah's going to be talking a lot in just a second about small steps. So the small step I'd love you to invite you to do is to just start exploring those questions that I brought up. I think you're smart enough to see that we've been hoodwinked, and I think you'll probably discover that maybe you don't want to play that game anymore. And if you can realize that much, what I'm talking about is a transformation in the way that we think, the way that the norms that we bring to the kitchen. That takes time, but you have to start by questioning and asking if it's true and seeing, maybe I don't want to buy into that. Okay, so thinking about that, and Sarah, let me turn it over to you now. I want to hear how you've got to say about small steps and mental muscle and discipline.
Well, first, I want to say that I feel tense just hearing all of this. And I am a person who I've always loved to cook. Unlike you, I guess, Mary, like I really, well, I grew up cooking, but then in my family, but then in law school, that was when I started to really start collecting cookbooks, and I cooked with all my friends and for my friends. So I sort of came at this differently than a lot of other people and a lot of people that I coach. So, but that's where I come from. And then listening to you, I literally am getting a knot in my stomach, like, OMG, this is a lot. This is a big ask. And I think that is where, taking this to the micro level, where
Yes.
I am meeting my clients on a daily basis, I really think this is what people are feeling, is this sense of overwhelm. They, people may be nodding. I can only see half of everyone's head right now because I'm on my laptop. But, generally when I'm saying things like this to my people, everybody's nodding. everybody, nobody, just as you said, Mary, says, I want to eat, flaming hot Cheetos all day long, except for maybe a 13-year-old
Yeah.
of Melanie. But, and I know I should cut down on, my trips through the drive-through, but I don't know how. I don't really know how to start implementing this. And then even when I start to implement some of these changes, then life goes sideways and I slip right back into the old habits. And, so I've set out to do X number of meals a week that, I assemble or prepare at home. And then it gets, winnowed back down to 0. Or maybe 1 or whatever it was. But in any case, there's backsliding. So just to bring this, I just wanted to quote a couple of statistics, Mary, to really twist the knife on the stats. It's actually 60 to 90% of Americans' diets come from ultra processed foods.
Oh,
90%.
thanks, Sarah.
Right. And then the higher the UPF intake, 50% increased risk of death from cardiovascular disease related causes, 48 to 53% higher risk of anxiety and other common mental health issues, depression, and a 12% greater risk of type 2 diabetes. So those are things that people come to me for all the time. I think people are very surprised about the mental health stuff. A lot of that is related to the microbiome, which you did discuss, Mary, and that, our gut microbes really affect what's going on in our brain. And there's like this feedback loop. So small steps, they just need to be really, really small. And I think that is the best way to start. And if we want to get into specifics, we can do that now. Mary, you can tell me where you want to take it. I think making the decision and then backing up, and this is my process with clients, sort of saying, I want to do this. I want to cook. I want to prepare somehow. Okay. And I do want to talk about that. Meals at home 2 nights a week, 1 night a week, anything that is an improvement is positive. I often say we're measuring ourselves consistently against an A+ 100% goal. And what we really should be doing is thinking about starting from 0 and working our way up. Can we make a 1%, a 2% improvement? Starting from 0, you've got nothing to lose. Like, let's experiment with this. Let's see where we can go. Yeah.
And one of the things that the questions I had when we talked about this before is that it seems like small steps are so small and our problems are so big. So maybe you can speak to that and give us examples. I'm sure you've had great successes, and maybe that'd be great to have a couple examples to give us hope.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that is the issue. If you look at the giant mountain that you want to climb, it seems insurmountable. If you break it down and say, I want to take 5 steps forward, 5 steps. Most anybody can take 5 steps. I mean, or we could crawl. I mean, meeting anybody wherever they are physically, whatever the equivalent of that is. So yeah, I mean, it seems very counterintuitive that doing something really tiny, like assembling 1 meal at home 1 day a week, if you otherwise eat or consume, food from outside your home, it seems improbable that even doing something like that and accomplishing something like that, and even if it's buying pre-chopped vegetables, frozen vegetables, chicken, even that's pre-cooked, pre-grilled, say, so it doesn't have a lot of added ingredients, but you don't even have to cook it yourself, and you're bringing in some chicken and some vegetables. I'm just using this as an example. It could be anything. If you're plant-based, you can be eating tofu, you could be eating beans, and putting a meal together like that. Once you have success with even the tiniest little change, it starts to rewire your brain for success, further success, and to build on that success and to create momentum. So even though you might be thinking, oh, whatever, this couldn't possibly make a difference, I see in my clients all the time in lots of different areas this phenomenon. And what you're doing really is rewiring your neural pathways, and you're creating new habits. And that's where like a coach comes in, or a trusted friend, or your partner, somebody who can keep you going when the going gets tough, because you sort of think like, oh, this isn't really gonna, no, like, let's do it. Let's buy a piece of fish. Let's experiment with this. But it really builds on it. And that's what I take all my people through. And I have, 14 plus years of successful coaching in all kinds of other areas.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
ask any of the women on here,
yeah,
and anybody that I work with, they're all like, really? And then they're like, wow, that's it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And can I emphasize too that, we do have a lot of it, and I should emphasize that I use us. It's a little bit too broad, because there are definitely people who like to cook. Yeah. And that goes to show that this doesn't have to be a dreadful activity. But for so many of us that think of it as, what's interesting about when you have a chance to make a meal and you're successful, it's like there's a little reward there that it never gets any press. Nobody ever talks about, oh, yeah, you get these nice meals and it's rewarding and it's reinforcing, but it totally is. And especially when you maybe add a little spice to that chicken and you go, wow, look what I did. There's something really positively reinforcing about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what happens then over time also is there gets to be, you start to feel better. And you don't
Yeah.
realize it right away, because it takes a little while for that to happen. But then there is that tipping point where you do realize that you do feel so much better if you are eating more real food, whole foods. And so then that is also motivating. And that's a reward also. Or if you're going to the doctor and your biomarkers are more in line or whatever. But on the really immediate level, it's like, oh, I created something that I actually would eat. Or, when my daughter was little, I made a meal that all three of us, we only have one kid, so me and my husband, all three of us ate this. It was literally like I wanted, like it wasn't. And so, or my partner or my roommate or whoever who's a notoriously picky eater ate that, and then it's like, oh, good job, me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Sarah, another thing we wanted to talk about was just this whole idea of mental muscle and willpower and discipline. And I felt like you had a good approach on that. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, well, my approach is to say that motivation is a myth. If we wait around to get motivated to do things, I used this analogy with Mary the other day. Is anybody motivated to make a dentist appointment? No. I mean, you don't want to go to the dentist, right? That's not, but you do it because you know that it's something that's going to affect the health of future you, right? So every 6 months, or I mean, maybe you're a little more relaxed about it, maybe every year you go, something like that. Make the time to go to the dentist. This is a similar situation. We need to take action. I see this with food. I see this with movement. I don't have time. I don't feel motivated. Okay, let's take a tiny action. Again, what is that small, 5-minute action you could take to get some more wholesome, nutritious food into your body today? Maybe it's setting apples out on the counter. With all the studies show that what you see is what you eat. And that is why people are eating Snickers in the line at Staples, because now you can get food anywhere. I mean, just anywhere, right? So motivation, waiting around for motivation really means that it's likely never going to happen. Those small little actions are really where it's at. And that, again, those build on each other and cascade you into some much more significant change over time.
Well, and that's interesting because we did talk a little bit about maybe questioning people in the audience and talking a little bit about the issue of motivation. But maybe it is irrelevant. And so I don't know, how do you reconcile those things? Do we just forget about motivation completely, or do we need to think about what?
Well, I think the bigger picture is the place to start. So again, sort of, what's my why? Why do I want to do this? Am I motivated?
Exactly.
And do I feel fired up because of what I heard you just say, Mary, about like, oh, now am I just a cog in the big food machine, and
Yeah, you
like
are.
that, pisses me off. I don't want to, I'm nobody's fool, whatever. Or, am I worried about some news I received from my doctor? Am I thinking about my health span, which is, how healthfully you're living over the course of your years? Do I want to be able to play with my grandchildren and live independently as long as possible? So having that sort of like the mountain, that we talked about before, and for like a lot of the women that I work with, it's, I want to lose a bunch of weight. That feels insurmountable. That's my mountain, right? So that's your why. That's your big why. And then you can back it down. Okay, so let's work backwards. How am I going to work backwards to achieve that? And that's where those small steps come in.
The small steps.
Get yourself. But then when the going gets tough, you can say to yourself, right, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I putting myself through this? Why am I, I'm reading labels. I'm, planning my meals, doing all these things that feel like a hassle. Well, right. Yeah. Because I want to lose 50 pounds, or I want to be independent as long as possible. I want to get off these diabetes meds, whatever it is. That's the thing that keeps anchoring you when you feel like throwing in the towel.
So it's kind of like you have a big picture motivation, but every day you sometimes maybe just need to kick yourself in the what and take the small step.
Right. Yeah.
And it's interesting. Every other person that I talk to that's in the healthy eating or health field will tell you pretty much the same story. Speaking of motivation, most everyone I've talked to, with one exception, we got into this because we suffered a health crisis, and there's nothing like a health crisis to motivate you and get you started, and you get that positive feedback loop going. But the question I had a long time ago, as I observed this, I said, really, do we have to all suffer a health consequence to be able to move into healthier eating habits and healthier living habits? And it's kind of sad to think about. And I think that's why Sarah and I do the work that we do, is we would love to prevent people from having to hit the bottom before turning around. And here it was. I told you it's gonna be here.
Right on cue.
Yeah, I knew it. It was so quiet and everything. But anyway, it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. That, think about for yourself. Are there some other whys that can motivate you, this big picture motivation, other than if I don't do it, I'm going to be in really serious trouble? I mean, there's
right.
There's much more positive ones than that.
Yeah, I have clients who have said things like, I want to be able to ride a bike without feeling like I'm worried about how my butt looks on the back from the back. I want to be able to get into a canoe without feeling like I'm going to tip it over. Or, also, I want to go on a big family vacation with my kids, and I want to keep up. I don't want to be the person who is holding the group back. So it doesn't even have to be, and it could be cosmetic. It could be aesthetics. And like people, poo-poo, oh, it doesn't matter how you look. Well, let's be frank. Most of us want to feel like we feel good in our bodies and proud of who we are. So if somebody comes to me and says, my jeans don't fit anymore, and I really feel like crap every time I put them on. Well, okay, so that can be motivating, right? So it can be anything from the really big to, for me, it was, I had cancer and I didn't want that to happen again, so, but, let's take it down a notch. Exactly. Like it does. Hopefully that will never be you. And it could just be, I want my bum to look better on a bike.
Oh.
If
And
that's what gets it done, that's what gets it done.
Takes a little effort too. You need to really think about that. Like, why is this important to me? Yeah. Well, I wonder if this is a good time then. We'd love to hear from the audience members. You can unmute yourself. I think, let's see, you can unmute yourself and then, or I can ask you to, or something. I can't remember how they do it. We could just unmute everybody. Or just whoever would like to talk and share with us. Do you have some motivational inspiration that is keeping you going? I think it could help everybody if we could share some of those. And meanwhile, if you have any issues around motivation or taking small steps, why don't you share those with us, and then we'll wrap it up with a few practical things. But I think it'd be great to hear from people. Is anybody willing to share anything? I know it's kind of personal.
I don't mind sharing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, good.
So when I started working with Sarah, I really felt like I was addicted to sugar. Like it was like a drug, and I was like an alcoholic, and that bothered me that, I was pretty much in control every area of my life. I'm pretty disciplined, but like sugar was like, really, I felt like it was just my drug of choice. Like I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, but I had no self-control around sugar, and that, I was trying to get better about that. So I can say the small steps definitely helped. It's been a long process. But I find as I eat less, I crave it less.
And Lois, what motivated you to want to care about that and do something?
Overall, I wanted to feel healthier, and I had gained some weight with some injuries, and I couldn't exercise the way I was exercising. And then just by bad luck chance, I had a heart attack about a month ago. So that's really kind of scared me silly. And has been like a really powerful motivator. Like, do I really want to eat this? Even though like for me, they said it was probably just like bad luck. But just because like they think a piece of plaque just broke off and clogged an artery. But it's made me think much more. Like that has definitely been more motivating than anything else, though. But I had already kind of started on this path, so it's felt like an evolution, and that was kind of the final kick in the pants. So
yeah, well, good for you. Sugar's a tough one. It's addictive. It is a drug.
yeah.
And yeah, I had to get off of it too, and it was hard at first. And again, is because I had a candida infection on my skin, and had to get off of it. And before that, I had been saying, Mary, you better watch this. Even though you don't eat white sugar, you're still eating a lot of honey. And my body was telling me, my mind was telling me, and I was ignoring it. And then, I guess there's some advantage to conditions that don't kill us, but get us on the right path.
Yeah.
Sadly. I think somebody else was going to share something. I'd love to hear from them.
Mary.
Yeah.
Betty. Yeah.
Oh, someone else? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Betty, it's you.
Oh, yeah. So, for me, in regards to motivation, I am very motivated for many, 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 many years, but I just push them aside very quickly. So motivated to be healthy so that I can live long for my kid and so on and so on. So, but for whatever reason, I managed to forget about the motivation or push it or not think about it. So that makes it easy to then not better myself to follow what I want to follow actually. So, and I think for me, it's also a little bit of self-sabotage, maybe. And also maybe a little bit of OCD, maybe, because like when I'm thinking, oh, I want to eat that, I want to eat the gummy bears. I barely can. Some days I'm fine. I can manage and be like, okay, I don't need that. And other days I'm like, oh, I really don't care. I need that. And when I think about it, then I can't let go of it until I have the gummy bears, so to speak. So yeah, so trying to change a few things here and there. Already doing different things much better. Like for example, um, I don't drink Coca-Cola anymore for a long time. I actually also don't go to McDonald's anymore. I used to go, although not often, but I don't do that for many months. Yeah. So I guess for me, the motivation is there, but I just don't follow it. And my mom always says, like, I'm waiting until it's too late. And she might be right. And I'm trying to break that somehow a little bit. So I don't know how, but trying to break it.
That sort of gets into something that you and I talked about, Mary, and that's sort of the stimuli and the, you know, having all those all the what am I trying to say?
We're all tired.
Reminders, you know, around all the time of the foods or the things that you love, and, you know, sort of distraction as a strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's for me indeed the case. I distract myself easily. And then when I'm worried about something, I'm like, oh my God, I can't eat that. I could get diabetes. I eat it to prove to myself, okay, I'm not getting it. I'm fine. Nothing happened.
Right. Yeah. And I want what I want when I want it.
That too. But I'm doing a few things better, but I mean, not every day, not all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Betty. Those were interesting perspectives. I'm going to listen to the recording again. And, you know, it was interesting that you have this big picture motivation, but it doesn't filter down always to those little actions. And so maybe, how do you connect those? Interesting.
Maybe it also feels like it's such an effort that I don't want to deal with it. So I push it aside.
Yeah.
The actions to follow through is like so hard for everyone. But for me, the way how I feel about it, to me, it's like exhausting. So I push it away. And I'm telling myself it's fine, nothing will happen. And then next moment, I'm like, oh my God, I ate this and that. Oh God, this will happen.
And willpower is a finite resource. And I think we try to muscle our way through a lot of situations using willpower. And, you know, even every day we make a million little micro decisions. We have to make a million little micro decisions. And so that's fatiguing. And then if you add on to that any sort of, you know, other stress with kids, work, you know, household stuff, whatever, it can just be overwhelming at times. And you do just want to throw in the towel, throw up your hands, because it just feels like too much.
Yeah, I think you said what you said exactly what I feel, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, so that's when we get into our practical tips, that's setting up some systems can be super helpful because it kind of takes a lot of that stuff off the table. And so to speak, and so that you don't have to really make those decisions at every turn. And then it can just, if you just have some sort of systems and habits in place that you implement.
Yes. For a
can-
while, I would always go up early, 7 o'clock. So I basically let my son and my husband do their thing, watch their show, and I would be going upstairs and watch something on my iPad or do my drawings or whatever. And I wouldn't go downstairs anymore, so that I wouldn't sit there wanting also to snack on something, because my husband is a snacker in the evening often. And yeah, I did that for a while actually. But then it was too long. My husband was always sitting then alone, because at some point my son would go upstairs to get ready for bed, this and that, for next day school. And he would be alone downstairs and I would be alone upstairs. So then I started going downstairs again. And then, yeah, it's like you're sitting there tired, just want to snack on stuff, eat stuff.
Yeah. And so there again, it's like, then it's just gone back to the way it was. Does anybody else want to thank you, Betty? I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to, what you and Lois have shared. Does anybody else want to share before we go forward? Because I'm sure there's universal experiences here.
And Sarah and I are both happy to stay on after the webinar. So if anybody wants to chat about anything else afterwards, that's fine. I think that what Betty and Lois have both said was kind of a good segue into both Sarah and I have some handouts that we want to share with you. And the ones that I want to share with you have to do with this idea of willpower. And it's like, when I was thinking about it, I said, because Sarah and I talked about this willpower business, and it's like, when you think about it, remember the industry has carefully researched and spent millions and billions and trillions of dollars to create products that are deliberately addictive. And so when you think about having this in front of you, like it's on the snack tray while you're watching TV, I mean, do we really honestly think that we can willpower our way into winning that fight? And I don't know who can, it's really tough. So what I've created is a handout. It's a 4-page handout, and it's talking about what can we do instead that could make the fight a little more successful, get some wins. And so I'm just going to briefly go over these for you, but I encourage you to, they're in the link is in the chat, and I'll send it out with the recording too. But the first is just that, speaking of small steps, there's a number of different kinds of substitutions that we can make to be able to slowly step away from these ultra processed foods, because there are a little bit better versions. There's some options. So take a look at that, number one. And this is all, I've got it as a roadmap for transitioning away from ultra processed foods. And the reason I use the word transition is because this is something that will take some time. So don't get too anxious for yourself. So step by step. The second step is to move on and minimize the environmental triggers. And maybe, Sarah, that was what you were thinking of, is that, remember, we are inundated with a barrage of marketing things created by the most expert psychologists in the country. Again, do you really think you can fight them? Probably not. So, minimize your exposure. Can you minimize your ad exposure? Can you be smarter than the marketers and exercise the saving pause at the grocery store instead of just reaching for something because ding, 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 the jingle is running in your head? Think about that. Be a little conscious of that. So there's some more hints there. Because part of it is you might not want to wait until the cream puff, the chocolate cream puff, is on your plate in front of you to try to exercise discipline and willpower and be good about the way you're eating. So all of these things in the roadmap are asking you to, what can you do before that? And it's probably going to be a lot more effective because, just stopping yourself from reaching for the flaming Cheetos or whatever they are could be easier than not eating them when they're on your plate. So these are things to think about. And then be sure to get proactive about hunger. That's the next step. Because do you think you're going to get hungry tomorrow? I think there's a 99% chance that you will. But a lot of times we just, I'll think about that tomorrow. Well, when you think about it, it's when you're starving. And if you do it at that point, what are the chances that you're going to resort to ultra processed foods? Because they're convenient, they're ready to go. So these are things about making friends with the kitchen. When I say that, what does that mean? Lots of different ideas here. And then the final thing, and how I want to close out, is in this transition roadmap, is to end up as part of something bigger, which is a new eating culture. I've talked about how our current convenience eating culture has enabled us to eat against our own self-best interest. But you know what? Nobody's forcing us to buy into that culture. It's just the norm. We've never thought about it. But if we think about it, we can create a new one. And that's why I want to encourage people, whenever I do a webinar, whenever I write an article, it's always about, can we each take small steps to create a new culture that supports us? It's like if you go in other cultures, their culture supports good eating. They don't eat ultra processed foods unless the marketers get there. But they don't eat those. I mean, can you just imagine being in a world where those just weren't there? Your husband wasn't down in the downstairs eating ultra processed food snacks. Can you just imagine that? How easy would it be to eat the way that we really want to be eating? So I want to encourage you to be creative, be courageous, take the first step, and keep this wonderful vision of a supportive culture. And every time you make a meal, you're adding to it. So that's kind of a closing it out for me, and that will be in your handout. So Sarah, I know you've got a wonderful handout. That's so impressive.
So what that roadmap is essentially I take my folks through that on a micro level. So that is exactly, it is a transition, it's a process. It's about then the steps that each person can take sort of within those categories that fit into, your particular life. So because everybody's life is very different, and what works for your friend, Frida might not work for you. So it is really doing some hard thinking, as you alluded to, Mary, about, what's attainable for me? Why do I want to do this? What do I really want here? And then breaking it down into steps that work in your real everyday life, not some idealized version of your life. As I always say, like, I feel like I shop for clothes that are for the life that I wish I had and that I don't actually have, right? Like, you want to be eating the foods and the meals that really work for the life that you really have. So I have prepared a booklet of 50 recipes. So there's a wide variety of breakfasts and lunches and dinners. And, if you know me, you know that I eat any food at any time of the day. I'm not limited by conventional, American breakfast or things. So you might eat whatever it is. Yeah, at any time. And thinking about, there are things in there that, and there's snacks and there's portable things, but there's things in there that you could prepare ahead of time. And so, as Mary said, there is a 99%, I would venture 100% chance that you're going to get hungry tomorrow and the next day and the next day after that. And frankly, that's part of the problem, because we can't stop eating. We can stop theoretically using illicit drugs or, I don't know, hanging out with people who are destructive to us, but you've got to eat, so you have to figure out how to do this in a strategic way that will help you and not hurt you. So for a lot of people, making things ahead of time really works well.
Absolutely.
Something that you can pull out of the fridge. And again, it doesn't have to be a big quinoa salad, which is something, there's a recipe in there for that, and that is something that holds very well. It could be as simple as doubling up the rice that you prepare on any given night, roasting 2 chickens instead of 1 chicken, making extra chicken breasts if you're grilling up a bunch of chicken breasts on the weekend, something like that. So then you just have things to pull out. So when you are faced with that, like, oh my gosh, I'm starving and what am I going to eat? Well, it might not be the most spectacular thing, but it's going to get it done. And I talk a lot about that with people as, sometimes we just got to get it done. And it's not going to be spectacular necessarily, but you're going to feed yourself better than if you do go through the drive-through or something like that. So I will send that, or Mary and I'll send that, however we send our emails tomorrow. You will get that. And